Welcome to IVF This, Greatest Hits, Episode 5, Toxic Positivity. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you are all doing so well. As you can probably hear in my voice, it's not been a great health week for me. I've had some allergies, some asthma, and kind of lost my voice. So this week we're going to harken back to one of the first few episodes that I ever did. And this one's on toxic positivity. Toxic positivity comes up a lot in our cultural vernacular lately, especially around family units, workplace, relationships. It's discussed widely. In this episode, I take a very specific lens and I apply it on the things that people say to us, but also the things that we say to ourselves, like within our community or also just literally to ourselves, the things that we say. And so I want to make sure that this gets back to the top of your podcast feed because I think it's a really important lesson on how we internalize a lot of the toxic positivity and we use it against ourselves. So I hope you enjoy this re-listen and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Before we get started, I wanted to share a couple of things with you that are new for IVF This. Firstly, I've launched mini sessions. So mini sessions are an opportunity for you to get coached by me at no charge just to see what it's like. It's 30 minutes dedicated completely to you. So if you've been wondering what it's like, but not sure what to expect, go to my website, www.ivfthiscoaching.com, and click the mini session button. Schedule a time that works for you and come with something specific you want some help on. The more specific, the better, because it is 30 minutes, but it's 30 minutes that's really going to make an impact. I promise you. I tell all of my clients, you're never really the same after being coached. Sometimes you have massive breakthroughs, and sometimes there are just little tweaks, but you're never the same. You can also access the scheduling link for those on my Facebook or Instagram accounts as well. Both of them are at IVF This Coaching. The second thing I want to tell you is that I'm launching a free course on managing anxiety during IVF. It's basically an introduction on what anxiety is, what conventional wisdom gets it wrong about anxiety, and then the 3 steps that I use to help my clients manage it. It's an amazing resource that I'm so excited to share with you. You can find it by going to www.ivfthiscoaching.com/anxiety. And the link, of course, will be available on my social media platforms as well. Okay, let's get down to business. Today, we're talking about one of my favorite things in the world to bash and, well, frankly, just straight shit talk. And that is toxic positivity. I've talked a lot about toxic positivity in previous episodes, and so we're finally here, and I can't wait to share this with you. So I'm going to spend some time talking about what it is, why it's so prevalent in the infertility and IV space, and what are some of the ways you can manage our thoughts without forcing positivity. So let's start with toxic positivity. It is essentially socialization and cultural messaging that tells us no matter how dire or difficult a situation is, people should maintain a positive mindset. It's the good vibes only approach to life. My biggest beef with toxic positivity is that it reinforces this belief that negative or uncomfortable emotions are a bad thing, that they should be avoided. So positivity and happiness are compulsively pushed, and the authentic human experiences, like negative and uncomfortable emotions, are denied, minimized, or invalidated. The pressure to feel and look, quote unquote, okay, denies us the range of emotions we experience as humans. This is a problem for 2 reasons. 1, it gives the impression that we are defective when we experience negative emotions, which then can feed an internal narrative we might already have about being weak or inadequate or unworthy. 2, By resisting our negative and uncomfortable emotions, we actually create more of them. Anxiety begets anxiety. Frustration begets frustration. By resisting those emotions, we actually make them bigger and more uncomfortable for ourselves. This is very problematic for those of us who are experiencing infertility and going through fertility treatments because it presupposes that even though we are experiencing pain, we have to force or to seem positive in a situation where that is not going to be a natural feeling. Or when there is a problem that legitimately needs to be addressed, but it can't be addressed if you don't allow yourself to acknowledge that there is pain or distress. Toxic positivity at its core is an avoidance strategy. Either we're trying to avoid feeling a certain way, or other people are telling us how we should feel because they're uncomfortable and want to avoid that discomfort. The reason that toxic positivity is so pervasive in infertility and IVF is because the shit that we go through is really, really uncomfortable. There are so many painful aspects to this journey. The pain is visceral. The loss is real. People don't want to be uncomfortable. None of us do. What's more, we are not taught about discomfort in a way that would lead us open to experiencing it. We're taught that discomfort equals bad, that discomfort should be avoided at all cost. So whether it is you trying to force yourself to think positive because you don't want to feel the discomfort that you're feeling, or if it's someone you're communicating with that is uncomfortable, maybe because they are naturally uncomfortable talking about sex or reproduction, or because of the pain associated with IVF, or maybe it's because they know you're in pain and that makes them uncomfortable. All of these things are commonplace during IVF. And so it makes sense why toxic positivity is so rampant, right? Nobody wants to feel uncomfortable. Everyone wants to feel happy and easy breezy all of the time. We think we're entitled to that, but we're not. Life is always 50-50. It's okay to not be okay. That's one of my favorite thoughts that I practice around my infertility. I got really good at practicing it after our failed transfer because I could feel myself trying to push towards forced gratitude. Thoughts like, I should feel grateful that I already have 2 beautiful and healthy boys. Now, I'm not saying that I'm not grateful. Thinking about my boys, I am overwhelmed with gratitude that I get to be their mom. But that does not make the grief that I experience about that loss any less real or valid. And it certainly doesn't make it any less painful. We can't, as humans, just choose only the emotions we want to experience. It just doesn't work that way. Now, I do believe that our thoughts create our feelings and that we can choose how we want to think about it, but it doesn't mean that we get to control the thoughts that automatically come to us. Most of us don't do that. Most of us don't allow ourselves the space or permission to feel an uncomfortable feeling. But feeling our feelings, painful or not, is what keeps us grounded in the present moment. Allowing an uncomfortable feeling, sitting with it, feeling it, that is the fastest way through it. So, how do we navigate this toxic positivity culture in IVF? Number 1, feel those feelings. Sit with it, sit with it, sit with it, sit with it. It feels like shit, yes. Yes, it does sometimes, but it feels like shit for far less time than when you try to avoid or stuff them down. That time that we spend doing that is exponentially longer than when we just allow it. Allowing an emotion, and if you want a little reminder on how to do that, you can check out my Feel Better Now episode where I talk all about it. Allowing an emotion is the fastest path to healing. Number 2, you need to remember that people are just going to say some bullshit. There will always be someone that tells you to stay positive or to look on the bright side or something like that. Expect it. When people are saying that, it's because they are feeling uncomfortable and they are trying to avoid feeling that way. Yes, it is dismissive and often insensitive, but it doesn't have anything to do with you. That's the thing to remember. You getting upset or reacting to that doesn't serve you in any way. We're never going to get people to stop saying stupid things. So expecting them not to will only lead to your suffering. You can make requests of people. You can always say, please don't say that to me, or I don't appreciate you saying that to me. But we ultimately don't have any choice in the matter. If you expect people to do these things, then you're not going to be upset or as disappointed when it actually happens. There won't be any reason for you to react to it because you've planned for it. Number 3, remember that feelings are not mutually exclusive. Part of our human experience is that we can feel more than one emotion at a time. Healthy positivity acknowledges the authentic human emotions. It rejects this all or nothing, either or mindset. It holds that two opposing concepts can be true simultaneously. It's called cognitive dissonance. Just because you're feeling pain doesn't mean you will never again experience happiness. For me in our failed transfer, just because I was grieving that loss didn't mean that I wasn't grateful for what I already had. Number 4, plan to be in pain. Now, this is not as doom and gloom as it sounds, so stay with me. So often we get into trouble because we expect things to look or be a certain way, and that we are going to feel good or happy or whatever. And then when that doesn't happen, because, well, life happens, it's like we're hit by a bus. It's the double whammy of having the upsetting thing happen to us, but also the disappointment of what we thought it should look like. There are parts of IVF that really, really suck. The waiting, the uncertainty, and that's not even getting into failed cycles, canceled cycles, losses, or anything like that. I was working with a client that had just had a fresh day 3 transfer, and she was in her 2-week wait. Her beta was still a few days away, maybe like 3 or 4, but she came to our coaching call feeling like her period was about to start. And she tried to keep telling herself, no, it's fine, just stay positive. But that only made her feel worse because she couldn't get there. She couldn't feel the anticipatory grief and be positive at the same time. So we talked about what it would mean for her period to come. We went down the worst case scenario path. That gave her the opportunity to get all of those thoughts out of her brain. To acknowledge that if and when her period came, that it would be painful, that she will experience grief and sadness. So she confronted the worst thing that could happen and made a plan for how she was going to take care of herself if it should come to pass. The very next day, I got an email from her saying that she was glad that we had spent that time talking about it and planning for it because she had woken up to her period that morning. But instead of beating the crap out of ourselves and all the things that we do when our transfers fail, she was able to acknowledge that she was in pain because this was something she really wanted. She was able to move through the pain faster and with less suffering because she had planned for it. Number 5, recognize toxic positivity messaging. Awareness is a huge part of my work. We can't fix what we can't see. Being aware of and seeing toxic positivity for what it is, which is a road to suffering, is what allows us to steer ourselves away from it. Here are some examples of toxic positivity messaging that we get in our culture. Good or positive vibes only. Choose happiness. Don't give up. Failure is not an option. It will all work out. I did it, so can you. It could be worse. Ugh, just saying those things makes my skin crawl. But this is the messaging that we get all day, every day. If you're in any of the IVF Facebook groups, you will see this shit plastered on nearly every comment. It's like saying, here is a shit sculpture I made with you out of words that should make you feel better. But forgetting that it's still made out of shit. Don't get me wrong. I don't believe that people are doing this intentionally. I don't think they sit around and they're like, what can I say that will perpetuate this bullshit toxic positivity culture that we have and help people stay on the shame spiral that are undoubtedly already on? No. This is such an unconscious part of our programming now because of this cultural belief that negative feelings are bad. At their best, these statements are trite platitudes that let you or other people off the hook from dealing with a feeling. At their worst, these statements bring up a lot of shame and blame for those of us that are already dealing with an incredibly difficult and painful situation. Social media is a huge purveyor of toxic positivity. Whether it is in Facebook groups where people are trying to be helpful, or influencers that rarely show faults, flaws, or highlight their own personal struggles. Now, we have a lot of amazing influencers in the IVF space that do show their faults and flaws and highlight their personal struggles. But that's not the case globally for all influencers. So be mindful of that on social media. Protecting yourself from toxic positivity requires some critical thinking skills and awareness. So if you feel the need to unfollow someone because just looking at their posts makes you feel worse, do it. Protect yourself from that. All right, that is what I have for you today. Remember, it is okay to not be okay. Have a beautiful week, my friends. And remember, I adore you and you have got this. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard and want to learn more, head over to ivfthiscoaching.com. That's www.ivfthiscoaching.com.